In this documentary, we'll be looking at risks. Have you ever taken risks in your life?
Yes, I've taken risks. The career choices I made, the paths I decided to follow, going against the advice of those around me, or the social consensus, or my milieu of the time.
We take many risks, especially as a young woman living in a large city. Our parents warned us about these risks, but we didn't fully grasp them at the time.
Yes, I got married at 22. I'd say that's a considerable risk.
I like risk. I think it adds spice to life and makes it more exciting.
Life is full of risks. You take a risk every time you cross the road.
Yes, I've taken risks. I worked in the humanitarian field, which exposed me to various dangers, though less so than the locals, of course.
L'année dernière, 20% des PME ont subi une cyberattaque.
C'est une maison presque coupée du monde, isolée par la montée des eaux de la M, près de Calais.
Poutine utilise désormais aussi l'arme alimentaire dans sa guerre contre l'Ukraine, décision qui va aggraver encore la crise alimentaire mondiale.
Climate change, cyber attacks, geopolitics, health. These are risks we now face daily. We no longer live in the world we knew. So how can we protect ourselves against these risks? More importantly, how can we lessen their impact? Who will protect us? Tailored solutions exist. Men and women everywhere are joining forces. Climate change presents a major challenge for our local municipalities.
Weather alert, severe rain and strong winds expected.
We wanted to find out more about how municipalities can prepare for and preempt flooding risks caused by natural disasters.
We strongly recommend that you stay indoors.
To explore this, we observed a true-to-life simulation of a fictional flooding event and prevention management in Saint-Quentin-Fallavier. As you will see, everyone has a role to play. But before we dive into our concrete example, what exactly is climate change?
Climate change can be described as a disruption of the environmental rules that govern our surroundings, caused by human activity. As we interfere with these constants, they try to establish a new balance, which inevitably impacts us.
Greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere are the main cause, and this phenomenon creates global warming.
This Tuesday morning, Mathieu Gaget, the mayor of Saint-Quentin-Fallavier, has assembled his entire team
To update you all,
to start a crisis simulation exercise.
is everybody paying attention? Right. We've been on red alert for about 20 minutes. Initial feedback indicates that Rue des Châtaigniers, Rue des Acacias, and Rue des Ormes are flooded. In response, we have implemented the Natural Disaster Local Response Plan. The head of operations is here in the committee room, where we'll be based for the next few hours. We'll display all information in real time so you can follow any incoming details. It's vital that we all communicate with each other. As soon as we receive any pertinent information that people need to know, we'll log it, map it, and act on it, okay? Alex, it's 9:21. I'll send the police a message to sound the warning on site, using the megaphone.
A red alert represents the highest level of warning in France. The mayor's top priority is ensuring the safety of his 6,000 inhabitants. Every second counts. As he coordinates operations today, nothing should be left to chance.
The local police will set up a roadblock in 10, preventing access to the area.
All procedures are detailed in this file, the Natural Disaster Local Response Plan, which serves as an emergency response guide. Each town has its own plan. Since 2024, about 21,000 local communities are required to prepare their own local plan, which plays a crucial role in risk prevention and crisis management.
Each risk is categorized, and each station has its own file, detailing the procedures, organization, operations, and contact information. We have the necessary resources. Here you can see the vehicles on standby and the building plans. I'll be stationed here as the head of operations. Each team has its designated files. The logbook registrar has their own files with their own procedures and documents, the support unit, the field team.
3 voluntary workers will be arriving soon here at the shelter.
About 30 officials and agents are stationed around the crisis unit, each with a clearly defined mission. One of these missions is to support people who have been badly affected.
Our homes have been flooded, and we've been evacuated here.
A total of 33 people need assistance. Could you reassure them, play with the children?
Do you need support?
Yes.
These monitors in their green vests make sure that operations are running smoothly. This morning's climate event may well be a simulation, but the initial difficulties they are facing are very real.
Do we really need to fill out this form? It takes time away from helping people.
In the case of an actual climate event, there wouldn't be any time for this.
Support cell. The 98 people identified as vulnerable have been contacted by the 3 Red Cross volunteers. Nothing else to report.
The entire morning is organized minute by minute from this small office.
I'm calling about the very strong winds and hailstones.
Today's scenario has been orchestrated by Anthony Viga from IRMA, France's major risk institute. Flooded roads, power outages and evacuated inhabitants. Nothing has been left to chance. This is one aspect of climate risk prevention in France.
The goal is to challenge the local municipality to implement their natural disaster local response plan, identify any weaknesses and explore areas for improvement. By pushing the plan to its limits and applying pressure for 3 hours, we get to see how the municipality reacts and how it rolls out its disaster response. At the end of the 3-hour period, we note any mistakes as well as any areas for improvements.
Exercises like this one are mandatory in France, and the town mayor Mathieu Gaget views them as essential.
It's very important. Here in Saint-Quentin-Fallafier, we face multiple risk factors. The question isn't if we will have a major disaster, but when. We know it's just a matter of time, and so we're doing our best to prepare. We regularly conduct drills, though not always on this scale. We're lucky to have been able to test our plan to this extent, so that we're ready and can react. This morning, we've already made a note of all areas that need improvement and how to progress. It's a process of continual improvement.
The experts we spoke to highlighted that exercises like this help communities better prepare for natural disasters, such as flooding, which has become more common and increasingly frequent all over the world.
Think of the Earth as human skin. It needs to absorb water. However, by covering the land, we've prevented it from breathing. This disruption blocks water from entering the soil, breaking the natural water cycle. And then, when water falls on dry ground, the Earth can't absorb it, perpetuating a vicious cycle.
Preparing people mentally well in advance of a disaster is crucial, because these are terrifying, highly stressful events, and we cannot predict how we will respond under extreme pressure.
Climate risks have repercussions on politicians and policy decisions, which is why, at the European, global, and by extension French level, policies are increasingly being shaped by climate risks, the need to prevent global warming, and support adaptation efforts.
Et donc qui interviennent à la fois sur la prévention du réchauffement et sur l'adaptation à ce réchauffement.
Notre maison brûle. Et nous regardons ailleurs. Nous ne pourrons pas dire que nous ne savions pas.
Qui aurait pu prédire la vague d'inflation ainsi déclenchée, ou la crise climatique aux effets spectaculaires encore cet été dans notre pays?
Est-ce que vos décisions vont dans le sens d'une sauvegarde de la planète? J'ai 3 gosses, dont un qui a 7 ans. Et je vous avouerai qu'au fur et à mesure que je les ai faits, je me suis posé quelle terre j'allais leur laisser.
We saw the Minister for Ecological Transition and the Prime Minister visiting the Nord-Pas-de-Calais region after recent floods. Are you only called upon during crises like these, or do you engage in initiatives throughout the year?
We're regularly consulted about public policies. However, whether or not we're listened to is another matter. Are our recommendations really acted upon?
Là, on pensait s'être relevé, on a racheté du matériel, on devait redémarrer hier, et en fait, aujourd'hui, on arrive, et tout ce qu'on a racheté, tout est anéanti une nouvelle fois.
Pour être capable d'apporter des réponses dans une temporalité qui est la vôtre. Vous, votre temporalité, c'est pas la temporalité administrative.
Les catastrophes naturelles sont toujours Natural disasters are incredibly challenging for everyone involved. Suddenly many people are affected, everything is destroyed, and it's a deeply distressing time. In such moments, providing rapid assistance is crucial. But even more important is taking preventative action before the event occurs. For example, whenever we know that a disaster is pending, we send text alerts to our clients, advising them to take preventative measures, such as closing shutters or moving cars into garages. These actions are highly effective.
How can we live with and adapt to climate change? It is possible. What adaptations can we make to minimize loss? For example, in cases of flooding, educating and training at-risk populations has a significant impact.
In France, we are fortunate to have a natural disaster coverage system, a framework my colleagues at the French Treasury aptly call a national treasure. For just €25 a year, individuals are insured against the consequences of natural disasters. It's a system that many countries envy.
The natural disaster system demonstrates that even in a world that is 3 or 4 degrees warmer, we can insure private individuals, professionals, and businesses. But we have to be prepared to inject a dose of solidarity in an initially entirely liberal market.
Back to the simulation operation at Saint-Quentin-Fallavier. When the simulation is over, every step is carefully analysed and each participant gives their feedback.
We're looking for general feedback and your overall impressions.
If there had been 115 people, it would have been a disaster. We were overwhelmed by the scale of what needed to be done, and it was impossible to provide effective support and reassurance.
The goal is to be ready for the day a disaster occurs and for the challenges of the days after that.
The financial stakes in the insurance sector have become more complex. We're seeing more and more disasters everywhere. And preferential orders, which formally categorize an event as a disaster, can sometimes take longer than expected to process. Such orders set in motion a cascade of legal, insurance, and sometimes judicial actions, often in a short time frame, but sometimes with procedures extending over long periods. It's hard for a municipality to insure itself against these risks, but even more so for individuals who are less equipped to handle these situations.
We need to focus more on prevention. For example, if you take Hurricanes Katrina and Irma in the US, they were about 15 years apart and followed exactly the same path. Yet, if we compare the costs of the 2 hurricanes, the second was less expensive than the first. Why? Because after the first one, the various states, businesses, and individuals implemented precautionary measures to better protect themselves the next time.
Milton a touché terre cette nuit. 1 million de personnes a été évacué en Floride. Et ce qui l'a rendu encore plus dangereux, c'est qu'il était accompagné de tornades imprévisibles et dévastatrices.
I stayed in my home last night because I wasn't in an evacuation zone. It was scary at times, but I know a lot of people suffered a lot of damage, but I think it could have been a lot worse. But we were already struggling before this hurricane, so we'll continue to rebuild.
Today, our primary focus is on compensating for damages. However, we must also prioritize prevention, helping our clients, and society as a whole to reduce risks and adopt stronger preventative measures?
The general public is aware and they truly do understand the risks. Yet, when it comes to taking action, there's a significant gap.
Today, we need a collective response. We're looking for mobilization from companies as expressed in their business continuity planning, although many have yet to take into consideration how climate risks could disrupt their operations.
Some countries are taking bold steps. Indonesia, for example, is building a new capital, Nusantara, to relocate residents from Jakarta and protect them from rising sea levels.
Jakarta et ses 10 millions d'habitants sont en sursis. Située sous le niveau de la mer, la capitale indonésienne est en train de couler. Construite sur un sol instable, la mégalopole s'enfonce chaque année d'une dizaine de centimètres en moyenne.
Il y a toute cette question des villes qui ont été bâties.
Many cities face challenges due to being built in areas that may no longer be sustainable. But that's not to say such cities will end up deserted like ghost towns. We can't simply abandon everything we've built. We can't just leave abandoned areas and let nature take over again. We must take responsibility for older buildings and work to improve our existing cities, as it's not feasible to simply relocate the entire world.
We live in an era where crises occur one after the other, or even simultaneously. And some of these crises are interconnected and interdependent. Understanding these interdependencies is key to managing them effectively. And that's what creates complexity in this new era of polycrises.
Ce sont des cibles de choix pour les pirates du numérique, les hôpitaux. Plus d'imagerie médicale ni d'accès au logiciel d'admission des patients depuis 48 heures au centre hospitalier de Corbeil-Essonnes au sud-est de Paris. Le système informatique est totalement paralysé suite à une cyberattaque. Une rançon de 10 millions de dollars est réclamée.
La prise en charge des patients est très longue. Les infos ne circulent pas du tout. Du tout. Tout se fait à la main et c'est très compliqué.
Ce qui m'inquiète plus, c'est qu'il y aurait peut-être une radio déprogrammée, donc qui serait repoussée plus longtemps, et ça fait déjà un mois que j'attends cette radio.
Cyber attacks pose a significant threat to many countries worldwide. How can we understand and fight this new risk? And how can we get ready for its effect on our societies? Let's start by defining cyber risk.
It's a risk that can jeopardize the confidentiality, integrity and availability of company data and information systems.
Cyber risks can affect companies, governments, and individuals. It's particularly alarming for individuals since they strike at the core of fundamental concepts, such as identity and vulnerability, especially in matters of health.
Compared to other risks, such as natural disasters, cyber attacks are driven by intelligent and malicious actors. They can be persistent. So we really have to be constantly on the ball as they evolve.
Des croix rouges qui s'affichent sur les écrans des ordinateurs. C'est le signe que le serveur de la mairie est paralysé. Les agents municipaux n'ont plus accès aux multiples données concernant le fonctionnement interne et externe de cette commune de 8000 habitants. La municipalité a été la cible d'une cyberattaque le 31 janvier. Elle a reçu ce type de message qui revendique le mode opératoire, une sorte de braquage numérique pour lequel les pirates demandent une rançon.
Aujourd'hui, pour moi, Today, I view cyber attacks as a digital pandemic. A few years ago, many were systemic attacks orchestrated by state actors. But today, cyber attacks have changed in nature and have almost become an industry, especially with the many ransomware attacks being launched. They are adversely affecting companies and hospitals these days.
When you ask people, what are you personally most concerned about? The most common response is my health. People consider their health to be their most precious asset, and rightly so. As a result, if a medical establishment is subject to a cyber attack, it amplifies the general feeling of vulnerability. that you can be personally affected. And then we have that the people being attacked are already fragile since they're in a medical establishment. So, there's a lot of emotion surrounding cyber attacks, especially involving medical establishments.
It's August 2022, and the Corbeil-Essonnes Hospital is subject to a major attack on its data. Éléonore Jouvet is one of the first experts to arrive on site.
Bonjour.
Dead screens, hospital departments cut off from each other, immobile robots. The first hours are crucial. Éléonore Jouvet's role is to help the medical teams maintain continuity of care.
Without this chain, we can't carry out the blood analysis that we need.
A cyber attack totally paralyzes all departments in the hospital. It's a race against time, against an evolving and intelligent threat. For example, in accident and emergency, normally, when an incoming patient arrives, your data is entered in a patient record. But if the IT system is down, we can't even carry out this very first step. The same goes for blood tests, for example, or the pharmacy robots that rapidly distribute medical drugs. Nothing works.
The drugs are dispatched from the pharmacy to the 1,200 beds of the Corbeil-Essonnes Hospital.
And you'll be able to deliver them to the wards, right?
Yes.
Without digital communication, 3,000 hospital staff have had to adapt.
The nurses requested the drugs using paper systems that we implemented. This is a significant downgrade, since usually everything is digitalized. The rotary stockers that you see behind me can no longer rotate, so we have to turn them manually, because there is no system of information transmission.
Digital has transformed everything, and so everything can stop. Everything can be attacked. I think CEOs are beginning to understand that.
We can protect ourselves and adapt to this new and more dangerous world, at least partially. The difficulty for individuals is that in their concrete, everyday lives, whatever may be their level of awareness of cyber risk, you need to take a lot of precautions to arm yourself against the threat. Over 75% of French citizens tell us that they don't read everything they should before visiting a website. They're aware of the risks they're taking by doing that, and yet they still carry on. Because in daily life, on a practical level, we can't always take all the precautions necessary.
During the Corbeil-Essonnes attack, thousands of personal data files were stolen when the ransom went unpaid. In 2023, the global cost of cybercrime exceeded $8 trillion, a rise of 15% in 1 year.
The main motivation behind most cyber attacks is money. Other types of attacks are also on the rise, such as attacks carried out to obtain the capacity for a further attack against an initial company with the aim of subsequently being able to attack their entire interconnected ecosystem. Attacks are also carried out to conduct industrial espionage or to destabilize states, particularly in our current context.
Following the attack, the Corbeil-Essonnes Hospital sought more effective protection. Working with experts and public agencies, they restored their computer system and drew important lessons from the incident.
We learned many lessons from this crisis. First, we conducted a retex analysis, and then we carried out other cyber crisis exercises, which helped us identify shortcomings in the system and areas for improvement. We have now greatly improved the organization of the crisis unit, our responsiveness, and reactions in the initial hours. We looked at what was useful and what wasn't.
We often say security is everybody's business, but it works best when there's a dedicated person to define a clear security policy. That becomes critical.
This morning, the hospital director and his IT manager are discussing their next simulation exercise.
So you've changed the entire network core. That's been done.
We've secured the whole network core.
It took nearly 14 months to change all these network cores.
Faced with the increasing ransomware attacks, they believe they need to take their cyber defense to the next level.
If we don't block the attack within the first hour, the hospital could suffer consequences.
The attacks clearly originate externally, so what we need is a unified policy. We also need improved cooperation between countries on these issues, at least in Europe. We've talked a lot about joint defense, a joint economic market, and communicating rail networks, but are we talking about joint cybersecurity on a European scale? I don't know.
An international response is gradually taking shape. In recent years, both Europe and France have strengthened their defences. As for the Corbeil-Essonnes Hospital, it's invested 5 million euros in a new computer system. However, according to Gilles Calme, insurers also need to step up.
I'll give you an example. Imagine your X-ray equipment breaks down for 6 months, causing business interruption. Insurance cover that risk. They're currently putting together an offer, a very necessary one, to cover cyber risk in hospitals. But it's not fully operational yet.
It needs to happen, right?
Absolutely, because I need to be insured. We need to be insured.
Everyone?
Of course. It's like insuring your home against fire. It's better to do it.
Have you noticed an increase in hospitals and perhaps other institutions taking out insurance in this area?
Absolutely. We're seeing much higher demand in the US right now. But Europe is also growing steadily.
Why is demand higher in the US than in Europe? Are they more prepared?
No. The risk surfaced earlier in the US than in Europe, but it's now increasing significantly in Europe as well.
Do you believe cyber risks are connected to other risks?
There must be links. One strong connection we're currently observing is between cyber risks and geopolitics.
As one risk often leads to another, cyber attacks can lead to geopolitical risk.
Alert, alert! Disengage.
Disengage.
What is geopolitical risk?
To put it perhaps rather succinctly and simply, geopolitical risks arise from interactions between nations. Some of these risks are systemic in nature. In other words, geopolitical risk can tip globalization in one direction or another.
Geopolitical risk shows two things. First, there are many consequences of geopolitical risk. And second, geopolitical risk has a huge impact on businesses, making the need for dialogue and public-private collaboration even more necessary. In less turbulent times, businesses were better able to call the shots in terms of their development. But states are now back on the scene, and we must increasingly collaborate with them.
To delve deeper in this theme, we spoke with Sea Captain Jérôme Henry, commander of the multi-mission frigate Alsace. Its primary mission, like that of the French Navy, is to protect the interests of French citizens and commercial fleets. Additionally, it must anticipate crises and intervene as required by the state.
The Alsace is an aerial defense multi-mission frigate, capable of addressing threats in all naval domains. In other words, against aerial threat, surface-level threat from other ships, and underwater threats.
A multi-mission frigate is a weapons system vessel of the French Navy that can engage in anti-surface fighting, anti-submarine fighting, and anti-aerial protection. It has a crew of 156 men and women. About a fifth of the crew are female. The average age is 28. When you embark aboard this ship, you're told that being a Marine is very tough, but that we really have exceptional Marines in France.
Des tirs pour neutraliser les missiles et drones outils en mer Rouge. La marine française mène cette opération depuis décembre 2023. Au large du Yémen, cette frégate française accompagne des navires marchands pour les protéger des attaques des rebelles Houthis, une organisation politico-militaire.
Typically, we operate in zones where Yemeni insurgents, within a country in crisis torn by civil war for years, pose threats to maritime traffic and take it hostage. They don't hesitate to use war weapons against commercial ships or warships. And so, in that context, the Alsace's mission is to protect commercial traffic, to protect ships that ask for protection, to defend French interests, both commercial and economic. As soon as it starts again, fire. Engage! I'll give you a concrete example. Take the case of the Red Sea today. Trade ships seeking protection contact the Maritime Information Cooperation and Awareness Centre, the MICA, in Brest. They formulate their request, and depending on our availability, we escort them. We remain close to the ships and are ready to intercept with our weaponry, either drones or missiles. Because French interests are closely linked to European interests, in particular from an economic point of view. What protects the European economy also protects the French economy.
While conflicts between armies and armed groups often occur on these waters, piracy also remains a significant concern. Piracy, unlike state conflicts, is defined as violence carried out for private gain, specifically using force. Piracy often arises from a combination of several crises.
Le phénomène a fait la une des journaux pendant plusieurs années. Des pirates prenaient d'assaut des navires marchands, des voiliers, voire parfois des super pétroliers. Ils enlevaient l'équipage et les échangeaient contre des rançons. Aujourd'hui, le nombre d'attaques a beaucoup baissé, mais les Européens déploient toujours 2 navires au large de la Somalie.
Si on parle de la piraterie qu'on a eu dans le
Piracy in the Gulf of Aden, off the coast of Somalia, began as a response to uncontrolled overfishing by various nations, particularly China. This left fishermen with nothing to fish. What initially started out as a coastal warring action by them developed into full-scale piracy. This demonstrates that the difficulty in controlling fishing on an international scale ended up causing other crises. Crises do indeed generate other crises, which unfortunately is now part of our day-to-day lives.
It's important for economic stakeholders to incorporate geopolitical risk into their strategies, and many are increasingly doing so. CEOs and executive boards are considering these risks into their decisions. The next challenge is to identify the tools and training necessary to raise awareness of these risks. Geopolitical risk is a relatively new concern, emerging as we've moved beyond a simplistic view of globalization, in which we saw an intensification of economic and financial exchanges and overlooked power rivalries.
Land-based conflicts, like maritime ones, have also escalated in recent years, further amplifying geopolitical risks. What do you see as the greatest geopolitical risk today?
Well, of course, the first one that comes to mind is the war in Ukraine. Its most significant consequence, which began not in February 2022, but in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea, is Europe's loss of its primary comparative advantage on a global scale, its strategic stability. I believe that this loss of strategic stability will likely last a generation, with profound consequences consequences in terms of military spending. We're already witnessing geo-economic consequences that have penalized Europeans, such as the breakdown of energy relations with Russia, which has caused inflation.
The conflict between Ukraine and Russia is not just a military confrontation, but also a technological one. Such as in this instance, where Russian President Vladimir Putin is depicted alongside his AI-generated double. We asked NATO about the impact this sort of practice can have on geopolitical relations.
Strategic communications this year revealed that from the very outset of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, each phase of military territorial conquest was accompanied by the creation of hundreds of local fake Ukrainian accounts, seemingly welcoming the Russian occupiers with open arms. This is really interesting because it reveals how military planning now incorporates information warfare to facilitate operations right from the outset.
While attackers are leveraging AI, its most promising use today lies in defense. Companies are developing AI-powered software capable of analyzing massive data sets to detect fraud, cyber attacks, and identify unusual behavior that poses a threat.
How can we minimize geopolitical risks and address rising global tensions? For Commander Jérôme Henry, anticipation is key.
Artificial intelligence provides us with a significant edge by enabling faster understanding of activities within maritime zones. This allows us to stay ahead of our adversaries, seeking them and identifying them more efficiently. Our main challenge today is to observe what other Marines are doing worldwide and to maintain the level we have reached today, which is among one of the best armed Marines of our time, or at any rate, the most capable and most experienced. We must remain ready, in that respect, to be able to defend French interests.
What steps can we take to shield ourselves from geopolitical risks?
We live in times in which our risk society, to use Ulrich Beck's term, is increasingly evident. Particularly in developed economies, people have understood the risk and seek to minimize it. I think that insurers, by their branding and the products they offer, can play a decisive role in the trust that exists between economic actors and public authorities.
We're living in a time of turmoil and transformation to an altered state, which inevitably increases geopolitical risks. However, while we often focus on the downsides of these risks, they do also present opportunity. Disruption, whether geopolitical or otherwise, forces us to rethink our approach and to reinvent or recreate our world. So we shouldn't forget the upsides these risks carry.
This is an era of unprecedented uncertainty, in which risks are evolving and becoming increasingly interconnected.
C'était mieux avant, je trouve que c'est une phrase qui n'a aucun intérêt toute seule.
On est plus nostalgique qu'avant parce que avant, quand il n'y avait pas forcément de téléphone, de photos ou quoi, on oubliait ce qui se passait avant.
Was it better before?
A good question. For 60 to 70% of the French population, the past seems better. There's a nostalgic belief in a simpler, better world, which is entirely false, of course. We lived less well in the past than we do today. But our relationship to modernity and complexity prompts the idea that things were better before. When you ask somebody today how they're doing, they often say it's complicated. They don't say it's difficult. I think this semantic difference is very revealing. When something's difficult, it means you've identified the threat. When it's complicated, it reflects the complexity of the issue. I think people have totally integrated this idea of the complexity of the world and the complexity of the solutions to implement. When you're dealing with a complex system, you don't know where to start.
Climate challenges, geopolitics, and cyber risk are among the top global concerns of 2024. Our sense of vulnerability has never been stronger. How can we reassure ourselves? One solution lies in our capacity to respond collectively to these new challenges. Do you believe in our ability to build resilience?
Very much.
I believe we have the capacity, but we need to act faster. We need a significant boost in coordination. It feels like a race against time, of our own creation.
All stakeholders must get involved. Businesses, local governments, and of course, collaboration at the European and national levels.
There's still plenty of room for improvement in terms of prevention and adaptation. This means we can develop effective responses. Yes, I have faith in our resilience.
I'm not convinced in our current capacity for resilience, given our level of dependency today. We're walking a tightrope.
In every crisis I've witnessed, the ability of organizations, both large and small, to coordinate and respond efficiently has consistently surprised me.
Every year, we produce the Future Risks Report, which highlights and ranks the world's most pressing risks. Although it changes a little each year, the risks are fairly consistent. What consistently stands out to me in the report is, firstly, people are increasingly averse to taking additional risks, and secondly, trust in public institutions to assist them in managing risk has decreased. These are not ideal conditions for building resilience. I think if we want to make and create more resilience, each one of us must take responsibility for their own prevention. That's what I call true resilience.
Resilience means different things to different people. In the years ahead, turning risks into opportunities will be vital to adapting to our ever-changing world.